Quail's Knitting Nest. My name is Joy, and this is my nest. In the end of the last episode, I talked about starting a pair of new mittens. So I thought I would start by sharing my old mittens and telling you why I need new ones. So these are my old mittens. The pattern for these is called Anatolian mittens, and they're by Marcia Lewandowski. Now, if you look up the pattern, you'll notice that what I have on the back of the hand is different than what she has, because I made the back and the front the same because I liked the pattern for the palm of the hand better than I did for the back of the hand, so I used it for the whole mitten. You'll also notice that I have two different colors going here. When I made them, I was using up stash, and I had two small multicolored balls in my stash that were similar but not matching. And I thought, what the heck, they're for me. I'll just make them one ball for one mitten and one for the other. And then I was using up my stash. Now I make my mittens large to wear them in the winter to fit over top of my gloves. And the reason I need new mittens is because the old mittens, I don't know how well you can see that, but my fingers are poking through the top. And there are also worn in the thumb. Now I've repaired these several times. I made these in 2017. So 2018, 2019, I guess they only made it through 2 winters. 2018, 2019, 2019, 20. That's not too good. Anyway, they've made it through 2 winters, and I did repair them between the first and second winters, and now here at the end of the second winter, I decided, I'll just make myself a new pair. So the new pair is finished. I will show them to you. Here they are. I love them. They turned out really nice. I mentioned last time I used Mountain Laurel yarn. This is their Shetland DK, and it's dyed with natural dyes. The blue is indigo, and the pink is cochineal, and I don't know what the gray is. It was not labeled. Like I said, I make them intentionally oversized so that they can fit over top of my gloves. These came out a little on the big side, which they often do. So what I did was I threw them in the wash. I did a cold water wash, machine wash. I put them in a lingerie bag, did a cold water wash, and then I pulled them out and let them air dry. And they did full very nicely, which not only shrank them a smidgen, but also fixed all the inconsistencies in my stranding. They look marvelous. I'm really happy with them. One thing that the wash did do, well, I'm going to tell you about the indigo, the blue color. When I was finished making the mittens, I looked at my hand and it was all blue. The color was coming off on my fingers. And that's a phenomenon known as crocking, which happens with anything, I guess, that you use that's dyed with indigo, which is why years ago, before there was pre-washed jeans, you always had to wash them first before you wore them, because the indigo would wear off on your legs and bleed in the wash and whatever. So it made my hand blue, which was my first experience with that. I had heard about it but never experienced it myself. And then after I washed these, they are noticeably lighter in color. Before I washed them, the blue was much darker. Now, I think you can still see the pattern on it, okay? And speaking of the pattern, I originally tried several different ways of using the yarns. I had the 3 colors, the blue, the pink, and the gray. And originally, the pattern has 3 sections. So it's got the cuff here with this pattern, and then it has this rose pattern here. And then there's a 3rd rose at the top, which I only have half of. So my original thought was I would divvy up the 3 different colors, and I would have like gray on pink, pink on blue, blue on gray, or something like that, so that each color had its own section. But when I worked the gray and the pink together, they were too close in value, like you couldn't even see really the pattern on it. The blue was the only color that stood out enough to make it seeable for the pattern. So what I ended up doing, as you can see here, is I striped it. So I used the pink and the gray for the background colors, and I used the blue for the foreground color for the whole mitten. Now, as I mentioned, I only have half of a rose here at the top, and that is because of my normal row gauge issue. I talked about the rose gauge messing me up in this sweater and other things that I've done. And in the original mitten, there are 2 8-leaf roses. Let me show you the picture. In here, you can see that there are 2 full rose patterns on the back of the hand. But because of my row gauge, I couldn't fit 2 full rose patterns. So I ended up about maybe a 1/3 of the way up the first rows. I started decreasing for the top. That's the hand. There's the thumb pattern. The only patterning I changed on this one was the inside of the thumb. I just did a basic checkerboard on the inside of the thumb. So that's them. I'm really happy how they turned out. I can't wait to wear them next winter. So I mentioned that I wear them over top of my gloves. And these are my old gloves. These I made in 2016. And let me look up. It's from the same book, actually. This pattern is called Annemor number 8. Here it is. And this is a pattern I actually worked pretty much like it is without doing much in the way of modifications. I had a ball of Selbuvotter in my stash. That is the blue and green. And then another random ball of white, which I used for the foreground color. And these are also wearing out. I don't know if you can see, but there's a big hole in this finger. Now these I made in 2016, so these are 4 years old. They are wearing in the middle finger and the thumb, and I've already repaired the thumbs and the middle fingers. It seems like pretty much every year. I think they might have lasted 2 years before I had to repair them, and then I repaired them the third year and then the fourth year, and now the fifth year, I'm like, oh, it's time for new gloves. But before I show you what I'm working on now, when I first started doing stranded gloves, I used an Alice Starmore pattern. It's just called Gloves by Alice Starmore, and this is my first pair. This I made out of palette, Knit Picks palette. And these had the same problem. They wore out in the middle finger and the thumb, which is why I no longer wear them. And I had issues with these. I wore them only one winter before they wore through. And I was really disappointed at that. So at that point, I decided I'm not going to use regular fingering for gloves anymore. I thought, sock yarn is good for socks. It'll probably be good for gloves too. And that's why I used the Selbuvotter and the white, which I forget what it is, but the white yarn in this are both sock yarn, so they have nylon in them. So these lasted 4 years, whereas this only lasted 1. But before that, after the Starmore gloves, I made another pattern from this Selbuvotter book. This is another Annemor one. This one's called Annemor 11, and this is what it looks like. And this is with the same, obviously, yarn that I used for these, because I used less than a skein of the Selbuvotter. I don't remember if I used the same white color or not, but gloves don't take up a lot of yarn like socks do. They're usually smaller. And let me pull up that pattern and see. I might have changed a little bit on that. I can't remember. Oh no, it looks like I did that one pretty true. Let's see, can you see it? There it is. So that one I stayed pretty true to also. And this one, I didn't let them wear through all the way to holes before I knit my new ones. Which is why I still have these gloves. They're basically still functional, but they're quite thin, if not completely holey. So I keep them as backups in case I lose a pair, which I did a couple years ago. I lost one glove, and fortunately, I did find it. Yay! So since I've made so many patterns out of this book, I thought I would talk about it a little bit. As I said before, Selbuvotter means Selbu mittens, or mittens from the region of Selbu. Selbu is an area in Norway. I would compare it to a county, because there are regions in Norway that we would be called maybe a state, and then within those regions are these municipalities that I would compare to a county. And then within the region of Selbu, there are, what did I put? 9 villages. So there are 9 villages in the area where Selbu is. It's in central Norway, and it's most known for the 8-leaf rose, which a lot of these patterns, like this one here, the 8-leaf rose in the middle of that, a lot of the patterns are 8-leaf roses or variations on that. So this is like a rounded 8-leaf rose. This one's not really an 8-leaf rose, but it kind of has a similar vibe. This is closer to your standard 8-leaf rose. They became popular in the 1850s in the Selbu region, and over the next 50 or so years, it spread throughout Norway and became wildly popular in the whole country, and has since become known basically as like the Norwegian thing. And in the Selbu region, they started hand knitting mittens, which were sold worldwide. They made up to 100,000 mittens a year for sale from Selbu. Which brings me back to this book. The author of this book, Terri Shea, is not Norwegian or from Norway. She lives in Washington in the United States. How she became interested in Selbuvotter is she was working as an intern at the Nordic Heritage Museum in Seattle. And at the time, she was an avid knitter, and her supervisor there knew that she was a knitter. So she asked her to catalog their collection of mittens that they have at the museum. So she opened up this box of old mittens and was like diving deep into a rabbit hole. So she cataloged the mittens for the library, and as she was doing it, she became more and more interested in them and how they're constructed, and so it led her to start writing up patterns for the mittens that she saw. Now, the mittens that she patterned from the Nordic Heritage Museum are the ones that are titled, I don't know if you can see it, but it's NHM, and then there's a number depending on which pattern it is. So NHM 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many there are. Excuse me. And then, as she was working on this, someone introduced her to a woman from Norway named Annemor Sundbo. And I'm not Norwegian, so I'm sure I'm pronouncing this wrong. My apologies. This woman had done her own research in Selbu and found a whole warehouse full of mittens. I'll put up a photo here of the mittens. Well, this is not the mittens that she found, but it's a sampling of Nordic mittens. And she had done work on these mittens that she had found, and she sent a box of these mittens to Terri Shea for her work. And those are the ones at the beginning of the book where the patterns are named Annemor. See, these are all named Annemor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the patterns named Annemor came from Annemor Sundbo in Norway, and then the patterns named NHM came from the Nordic Heritage Museum in Seattle. And she put together this book. A little trivia is that one of the patterns was test knit by a local knitter that we all know. Actually, it's this one, Annemor 8 that I made, was test knit by somebody that I know. I just think that's cool. It's like 6 degrees away from fame or whatever. Anyway. So I bought this book early on. Let's see. I bought this in 2008, and it was published in 2007. And I've knit, as you can see, I've 1, 2, and now 3. I think this is 3 from this book. I was trying to remember if I've done any more, but I don't think so. So now I've knit 3 patterns from this book. And my current mittens, or gloves, which I showed you, with a great big hole in them, I decided I may as well make new gloves as well. And I went searching through the library, my library, and I found another pattern from this book that I like, and I decided to make this one, which is Annemor 15. So now this is what I'm working on now. However, I am tinkering with this one. I don't really like the cuff pattern on this one, So I'm switching it out with the cuff from another mitten, number 10. So I'm doing the cuff on this one with the pattern on the other one. Now I've just started this, so I'm not very far along. But here you can see the cuff that I've chosen to work. And I'm also using stash. These are leftover sock yarn balls, and I should have enough to do both gloves. This one is Island Yarns, and this one is Cascade Heritage. How are things in your neck of the woods? I hope that you are well. Let me know what's going on, what you're working on. Have you finished anything? Let me know. Take care. Bye-bye.